Reagan Schrock, welcome to Unitarian Anabaptist for the second time.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Okay.
It's good to be back. It's been
Yes.
a minute since we did this.
Yes, it has. Yes. So we've got a number of topics to talk about today. And because it's a privilege to have a genuine Anabaptist on, I thought it would be good for you to give the audience an explanation of how how does the gospel message resonate with the Anabaptist? What is your if you when you're faced with relating to someone on the street, how do you present the gospel?
Mm. Man, that's a great question, and it feels a little odd because there are so many different forms of Anabaptists in the world, and I want to be careful that I'm not speaking for a whole people group, but more out of my own understanding of these things.
Sure, absolutely. Yes.
There's a lot of historical reference material on this topic, and you can dig into that and find all kinds of things. Um, but broadly speaking, you have Catholic and Protestant views of salvation, or Catholic, or High Church, Orthodox, Anglican,
Hmm.
whatever. Those are going to emphasize things like ritual, the Mass, the Eucharist, infant baptism, those types of things as part of your salvation. And on the Protestant side, they say that's very much of a works style form of of how they would view salvation. And there's a lot of nuance to that, a lot of complexities that I'm definitely not qualified to speak on because I'm not a Catholic. But then on the other side, you have like American evangelicalism, that style of Protestant, which just says, oh, it's all about, you just believe, you have faith, and God's grace takes care of it. And it doesn't really matter how you live. You raise your hand at a revival meeting, and bingo, you're zapped, and you're a Christian now.
Okay.
And if you get really into it, you got some of the 5 points of Calvinism, which is a whole other thing. But
Yeah.
where they would say, if you did that, you raise your hand, zap, you got hit by, Jesus saves you or whatever. You can never lose that. You are a Christian. Like that's that. It is a sealed and done situation.
Uh-huh.
The Anabaptist would be neither of those two extremes. Anabaptism would emphasize that, yes, you have to believe there's the faith element. Obviously, God's grace is what saves us. But there's also an element of, if you really do believe this and you wholeheartedly say, I will turn my life over to Jesus, it absolutely will impact how you live. Not to say that
Sure.
works alone saves you, of course not, but it's not like you can just raise your hand at a revival service and bingo, you're in, you got your ticket to heaven, and now you can go on with life. Anabaptism basically, at its core, started back in the Reformation era, saying we're not okay with that. We're not okay with saying you get saved by going to Mass, and we're also not okay by saying you can just believe in bingo, it doesn't affect your life at all. So that results in a lot of different things on how we live. For one thing, we view salvation as not just me alone, me and Jesus, which is that too, obviously, but it's me and the community of believers around me as well, where we're teaching each other, we're growing together, we're discipling each other. It's not, I just go on with my life. I have accountability to the other brothers and sisters around me. I can't just say, oh, I can live however I want. I can do whatever I want. No, there's accountability within the body of believers. Primarily, and there's a lot of emphasis on this. Again, it depends on which group, but we have different forms of, you're part of this particular assembly, like this, whatever local expression of the body of Christ. And some would be very extreme, like the Amish, where it's like you are in this community, and if you leave, there are some pretty substantial consequences, all the way to much more, like much more lenient forms of what we would call church membership. And those things are very controversial within my own church tradition, of course. But the foundational principle behind all that, regardless of how you live it out, the foundational principle is, it's not just me and Jesus. It's me and this community of believers, and together we are living for Jesus. We're going to Jesus. We're worshiping together. It's a very much of an emphasis on community. And I hope this is making sense. It's kind of got pieces from different forms of Christianity, all kind of.
What you're explaining here is, I think, how Christianity functions within an Anabaptist mindset. But
Yeah.
I think the question, I mean, and I appreciate that's, of course, very important for us to understand. And I know of, as one who's been in these kind of environments, I know what you're talking about with that respect. But the question I guess I'd like you to address, if possible, is what what is the messaging that is supposed to convict someone that they
Mm,
need to change? Like
mhm,
what is if the what is the gospel message? Like what is the message that is coming from the New Testament in your understanding that the person or audience would need to hear in order for something to start working in their heart in order to produce the kind of change that would allow someone to be part of a community like this?
mm. Yeah. Yeah. So again, I want to be careful that I'm not speaking for a whole group,
Well, I'm
but
asking you, no, no, no.
yeah,
You're just
but like
speaking
how,
your faith.
sure,
Yeah. As a man with, as a man who's has experience also meeting
sure.
people, and I'm sure you've come into situations where you've had to communicate the core message in
Mhm.
order for someone to be convicted, just like in the Acts of the Apostles, where the people were pricked in their heart when they heard the preaching, right? So there
Yeah.
has to be something going on here that perks someone's interest and makes them
Mm-hmm.
feel like they have a definite motivation to seek after God's mercy.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
how does that look in your view?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm
I
from
don't want
this.
to add too much. I don't want to add too much of my words, but
Oh no, this is
just
good.
in your own words. Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm from the South. So Bible Belt. I mean, like right in the heart of the Bible Belt. So I was very used to hearing things like, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're gonna just be, burnt in hell forever. And it was this kind of this fear
Yeah.
push, like,
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, there were those kinds of flavors, and yeah, that same like, hey, if you put your hand up in a church service, bingo, you can get saved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I live, everybody says, oh, I'm a Christian, and
Okay.
I
Mhm.
I really got turned off by that, and a lot of people from my generation, just really broadly across the American evangelical scene, have gotten very turned off by that. There's a lot of
Sure.
studies and surveys on that, and so I did some searching, and over the years, I actually kept coming back to how the Anabaptist way is, and just realizing how much more beautiful it is. Instead of this like turn or burn style of messaging, or once you get saved, you're always saved. Doesn't matter what you do. The
Yeah.
Anabaptists go a lot deeper
Right.
than that. Jesus says it really well when he's in the Lord's Prayer. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You're like, your kingdom come
Uh-huh.
on earth as it is in heaven. So like
Yes.
Jesus is saying, like, there's a
I like
kingdom
that.
coming. Like, it's coming. I'm bringing in
Yes.
this new
Uh-huh.
era, this new way of doing things. That is
Right.
this redemption piece for a very broken world. I travel a lot,
Yes.
and we talked about this in the last
Uh-huh.
interview. But I travel a
Hmm.
lot, and I bumped into some people, and um, that are pretty objectively, they're pretty evil, or they've done some very evil things, and there's no
Hmm.
question in anybody's mind that I have talked to, pick whatever religion, whatever cultural background, they look at those people and say, that's not okay, that needs to change, like, no question.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
wrote about this in one of my newsletters about how I interviewed someone for my graduating thesis who had personally been within 5 feet of Adolf Hitler. She was part of the Hitler Youth Program.
Oh
And
wow.
just realizing, like, after they were so deceived at the time, they didn't really pick up on it. But after the war, realizing just that was evil. There's
Yeah.
nobody who's going to say that that's okay. The Anabaptist worldview is saying not only do we go around to say, hey, say a prayer, everything's okay now. No, no, no. We're bringing, not we, but Jesus is bringing a deep restoration and redemption to the world at
Okay.
every level.
Excellent.
Um,
Yes.
and that results in a transformed life. So,
Hmm.
you be careful how I say this for confidentiality reasons, but there's a fellow that I know who works for a local Anabaptist business. It's run by some local Anabaptists. He's an atheist. He does not believe any of this stuff, right?
Okay.
But when he gives a tour of their facility to other people that are, interested, other investors, whatever, the other people there that are Anabaptists have heard him just bragging up the Mennonites. Like, I don't believe like these people, but man, when they say that they believe this, they live it. And there is something really different and really special about these people. They're the best people to work for. Like, he
Okay.
sees a little slice of God's kingdom living in
Yes.
those lives, even though he doesn't believe it himself. And I think that's the part that I'm trying to capture when I share the gospel,
Okay.
is like, anybody can be a part of that. You can be a little slice of
Yes.
God's kingdom, that little slice of redemption. Um,
Okay.
yeah, again,
So your
maybe I'm
approach
getting too
is
grandiose, maybe a bit too
no,
broad.
no, 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 no. Let's pick up on this a little bit. So you are not saying turn or burn. What you are saying is there's a new creation coming. Jesus will be reigning over that new creation. Jesus, in a sense, Jesus is already, he has overcome, being that he was
Yeah.
raised from the dead. So, so that the hope is actually that this new creation we can be part of.
Yeah.
Like at the time when Jesus comes back, we could be part of this new creation, but we need to start participating already in this life. Is that
Yeah.
framing it correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
okay, I love that. That is just so beautiful and so biblically based as well.
Mm.
So it's not a matter of it's more of a matter of bringing life. The focus is on bringing life. It's not on
Mm.
destruction and death because those things existed before Jesus. So Jesus has
Yeah.
made the change that we can participate in. I think it's very strong in Paul's theology as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's something profound in the book of Acts where, before they were called Christians, they called them, these are people
Hmm.
of the way, is what they called it. And that's a significant word choice. It's not, oh, these are the people of this God or that God. I mean, this is Rome. So, you expect, oh, they follow this God, that God. Okay, there was that. Yes, they follow Jesus. But they follow this way. Like, it's a way of life. It's a
Hmm.
whole mindset of Jesus is king and he is saving the world. He's bringing a new creation.
Yes.
He is bringing redemption and restoration to all things.
Right.
Yeah, this is pretty clear in Paul's writing, but in the words of Jesus as well, this really
Hmm.
deep redemption that goes to the core of what is really rotten and
Okay.
broken with the world. And you don't have to look very far. Humans are pretty are
Yeah.
pretty evil. We're seeing that right now with the two really big wars, like with Israel and Hamas, and
Yes.
then of course Russia and
Right.
Ukraine. Um,
Right.
you don't have to look very far to realize, hey, we're broken. We need help. Like, you do not need to be a Christian to realize that. I think we all see that, and every religion tries to answer that question in one way or another. And I really believe Christianity is the one that actually has a solution that is actually seems pretty comprehensive, whereas a lot of other religions tend to not really have that. And again, in my opinion, I'm sure other religious believers would would disagree with me. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah. So we're not here to judge in one sense, but on the other hand, I really like your reference to the Acts of the Apostles because it seems to me that the devotion of the believers, the followers of Jesus, in serving him as their king is actually a political statement, strangely enough. So, so their allegiance is not to Caesar. They're not going to offer sacrifices to Caesar or worship Caesar. Their devotion is to their Lord Jesus, who is their present and future king. That's quite a statement, isn't it?
yes, and it's very important to say present king, like right now. Jesus is
Mm-hmm.
your king right now.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, he's
Yes.
out there somewhere and he's going to come back, in the end and make everything right. No, like he's
Right.
he's king of your life right now. And you start studying into some of the culture and idolatry of ancient Rome, especially around emperor worship. And you start
Mm-hmm.
realizing why the Christians were called a cult, a very dangerous thing that we need to destroy, because they will not worship the
Right.
emperor. They will not say
Right.
Caesar is God or Caesar is Lord. Um,
Hmm.
Well,
Yes.
that's a pretty divisive thing to say. Like, sorry, actually, I
Right.
mean, Caesar, I know you're an important guy, but like, you're not Lord of the world. Like, you're just not. You know,
Right.
I mean, Jesus
Right.
is, and
Right.
that obviously got
Yes.
them in extreme trouble. Some of the worst persecution in the history of the church was during the first 300 years during that era with the
Yes.
Roman Empire,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
wouldn't say that. They were going for a much deeper redemption than any earthly power uh, could ever even hope to even dream of. You know, they knew, oh, this is way too small. You know, this is way too small scale. Jesus is the real thing.
Yes. I don't know if this is getting off topic or not, but let me throw this question
Sure.
out because of the way this conversation is going. What do you think happened in the Roman the Roman world, the Roman realm of Caesars, emperors, that actually caused them to change their opinion about Christianity and make it a state religion? Have you thought
Yeah,
about that dynamic? If not, that's
I
okay. But I just wondered
I
if you had
have.
given that any thought.
I
Okay.
I've definitely thought about that, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not a historian of the of the Roman Empire for sure, but you got to
Hmm.
wonder. Humans are pretty selfish, and one of the desires of at least some humans is power, and
Hmm.
I wonder. The Roman Empire is falling into decline, and then after after a few hundred years AD, and I wonder if they're looking at these Christians and saying, wait a second, like, here's a religion we can't crush. It just keeps growing and they are becoming
Hmm.
very, very influential. Maybe we should just join them and Romanize this thing and see if we can just, utilize, basically make this part of our
Right.
propaganda arm, so to speak. Which, again,
Uh-huh.
my friends that are Catholic and Orthodox are probably going to really, feel uncomfortable with statements like that because they would say, some of this was like actually really good.
No, it's
The
well.
Anabaptists
I
would
mean,
be
they could
very
think. Yeah.
much that this was not good, that was not okay. Constantine and merging this
Yes.
idolatrous secular power with the church was cataclysmic,
Hmm.
and a really bad
Right.
idea. And that's, you can definitely point out where it didn't work very well. Though again, there are some people who would still view that as overall a good move. um, I am totally
Yeah.
speculating, but I have to wonder because you
Okay.
see the same in American politics, for example, where they'll
Hmm.
play the Christian card because that's very advantageous. They get more
Yes.
votes. They get a bunch of people on their side. It's a pretty common technique in across the world. And we use Rome in America right now, but you could go anywhere in the world. Using religion like that as a power grab move. Um, and it's sad. It really
Yes.
is, because then the church gets all tangled up in this stuff. And it's like, no, no, no. Like, the church is about something way bigger than a little kingdom here or a little country there. It's the redemption of the
Yeah.
human race, which
Right.
transcends time. It transcends all peoples. And anyways, maybe I'm rambling a bit
So
there. I'm not sure
no,
if that's
no, no.
helpful.
I think really you have to admire Constantine for his brilliance
Mm.
in co-opting Christianity to you know to allow him to establish his
Mm.
rule and to continue the Roman Empire. They were fantastic at reinventing themselves. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
as you are, I'm sure aware, things changed in Christianity. Now you were having a Christian empire going out and slaughtering people of different persuasions. And of course, this was not by the design of Jesus, as we well know.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's actually Constantine. I think he had some of his armor made out of a supposed nail that was from the cross of Jesus. He had the nail
I'm
melted
sure.
down and put in his armor.
I'm sure he did.
his, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure it
So
sounds. Yeah, that
there's a
sounds.
whole there's a whole history there that's really fascinating. But
Oh
needless to
boy.
say, they weren't Anabaptists,
Well, okay, so
right?
yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that angle, because I was just reading again I mentioned this before we hit record, but I'm teaching a 2-week course on Christianity, the Middle East, some of these places around the world, because really this is a bit of a tangent, but the Middle East was actually where Christianity started. It was a Middle Eastern religion initially, and now of course we look at
Yes.
that and just like, there's no way. It's very much that not that
Right.
way now. But anyways, one of the things in that book, what they were talking about Constantine and some of these things, or in my
Uh-huh.
research, they're saying, the group that's persecuted Christians the most is other people who claim Christianity, all throughout world
Hmm.
history. And I really had to think about that, but it's actually kind of true, um, which is horribly sad. And I think that's what happens
It
when
is.
you mix this beautiful story of redemption and hope for all
Hmm.
peoples, and you try to politicize it, weaponize it, and use it as a means of gaining power. And what do you
Right.
get? You get some really, really weird and catastrophic things. Again, in my opinion, there are others out there who say, "Oh no, this is the way the church should be." I ran into a lot of that when I was doing my research for my thesis, where they were lifting
Oh,
that up as actually a positive. I just cannot see that. I really can't. I don't see where that works out. And I
okay.
don't see
So
Jesus ever even suggesting something like that, or Paul,
no,
or the apostles, or
no,
really take your pick of
no,
early
no.
Christianity. That just wasn't. Yeah,
So I think it's important. I think it's important to mention here because you're referencing Jesus and Paul and the apostles. An Anabaptist would hold that the scripture, the New Testament writings, would really be of an extremely high value and a reference point for Christians to go back to as a foundation. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it is. This is interesting because there's a thread, a mindset kind of underlying that's, well, Jesus comes and then it kind of builds from there. So like Paul and the apostles kind of build on Jesus. So like we need to actually put a little more weight on what Paul was saying because he had a more developed, branch of Christianity, or more developed, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure I'm butchering the because I haven't read into it that much. The Anabaptists from day one have been like, absolutely not. Jesus is the ultimate authority. Particularly the Sermon on the Mount is like the capstone, because we view the Sermon on the Mount as like Jesus saying, "This is the rules for my kingdom," essentially, or like this is what I want my people to be like. And
Mm-hmm.
it's immensely profound. Matthew 5-7. So yeah, Jesus and his words, again, particularly the Sermon on the Mount, would be really the cornerstone. Obviously, all of the New Testament is, of course.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of weight put on early Christianity. So, like how we look at how did they live in the Book of Acts? How did they do missions? How did they do church? And there's some speculation. Sometimes I wish, oh man, if they could have explained that a little better. But there would be a this real push within our groups to try to be like that. Because, well, if this is
Uh-huh.
what Jesus handed the apostles and they trained with him for 3 years, and then we immediately read in the book of Acts, this is how they did church, this is how they did ministry, that should carry a lot of weight, versus, oh no, we're going to stick with whatever church tradition, because
Yeah.
got some friends that just joined the Antiochian Orthodox Church because they claim, oh, we go all the way back to the very beginnings of the church. So
Oh,
therefore, these traditions carry all this weight, and you should be following those
oh wow.
traditions. And I'm like, my Anabaptist side kind of, whoa, my Anabaptist side, no, you should be
Yeah.
reading the Book of Acts and seeing what does that say, what does Jesus say, and that's what you're building your church on. And I'm sure that church group would claim the same thing, but I just found that really interesting. Um,
So how
yeah.
when you think about the message of the gospel and the preaching in the Acts of the Apostles, do you see something here that is Jewish in its character? Like is it something that
Hmm.
I mean, when you're framing these things, are you framing it from a context of Israel's expectations are being met in Messiah? There's something happening here as a fulfillment of the Old Testament that really needs to be understood
Hmm.
in in its Jewish context?
That is a great question. Um,
Probably a difficult question too.
that is a tough one. Yeah, that is. I'm going to say that's a
Yeah.
tough one. Um, a number of years ago, I would have been absolutely, yeah, we should be studying, Hebraic writings and Jewish traditions, and well versed in uh, the Torah, and so forth, the 613 laws. And yes, there's real value in that. And absolutely, like, New Testament really doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you deeply understand the Old Testament and study it. In
Right.
our Bibles, the Old Testament is 3/4 of the Bible. So, you really should be reading it. So I want to be very clear on that. There is real value there. And Jesus clearly fulfills um, an awful lot of prophecies about the coming of the Messiah and things like this. So yes, very important that it's steeped in that. And then when you read the New Testament, there's so much. Oh, there's just so much Jewish imagery and richness to the text. Jesus teaching in synagogues. They're calling him rabbi. They're
Yes.
using a lot of messianic terminology, calling him the Son of God, which is a very potent thing about the Messiah that's in the book of Daniel and things like this. Okay, so
Yes.
that's very important backdrop. However, in recent time, and after I started studying a lot more of the societal fabric that Christianity comes out of in the first century
Uh-huh.
and beyond,
Yes.
is we while those things I just said were all very true, it is extremely important that we do not forget how Christianity began in the Roman Empire in a very Hellenized, westernized society that was not Jewish at all, and
Right.
how the
Oh,
Jewish
sure.
people had been very assimilated into a Greek way of thinking, and many of them were
Mm-hmm.
not really observant. They were what we would call secularized, or very influenced by
Yes.
Greek philosophy, Western
Sure.
philosophy, the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I
Yes.
feel like that is a very important part of New Testament studies, of understanding that fabric. I mean, you see this in the teachings of Paul, where he's quoting, Greek philosophers and assuming his audience understands that. And it's like, that's
Oh,
part
yeah.
of what you would have learned in school at the time, and so forth. Jesus wasn't speaking Hebrew. I mean, the New Testament was written in Aramaic, in Greek. They would have spoken Aramaic, and written the New Testament in Greek, which is really interesting. Just things like that I think are very, very important for us to understand um, the societal fabric that Christianity is coming out of. It goes well beyond just Jewish tradition. I'm not sure if I'm going the right direction here with this question. I hope that's
Uh,
helpful. This is all just, I'm still kind of learning this stuff for the first
no,
time.
no, I
And it's pretty
understand.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, this is something certainly to engage our thoughts into. It's. I was just thinking about the Apostle Paul.
Hmm.
Apostle Paul was a Pharisee. He was actually the enemy of Christianity until he had some kind of encounter with a glorified Jesus. And this is,
Hmm.
of course, something very, I think, unique. His
Hmm.
experience in meeting this Messiah in some fashion or another as a bright light and a voice that he heard. And that changed him dramatically. It turned him around. So Paul is Paul is reinterpreting or reimagining the the message, and that the words. I think Paul is really big about interpreting the meaning of the promise made to Abraham
Hmm.
through the Messiah. So he's coming to the point where he sees that this promise that is given to the Jewish people is meant to be conveyed to the nations. So it is very Jewish by way of that the God of the Jewish people, the God of Israel, has given this promise that will go from the Jewish nation unto the nations. And it's really hard to frame. So what is going on? Paul's got a lot of enemies, right?
Yeah.
So is it really a Jewish message? Is it not a Jewish message? Well,
Hmm.
Paul thought so, and to get into his head and to see, like, to try to figure out, like, how does this really look? I mean,
Hmm.
what does Paul think that is coming in the future? Obviously, he's very strong about the lordship of Jesus, about the hope of resurrection. First Corinthians 15th chapter is, I think, my favorite from Paul's writings. And there's a lot there about what Paul's vision is. And I think it lays a foundation for the New Testament entirely. So Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think you did pretty good for a first
Mhm.
time around on that. Okay, let's move on. Um, so, so I think you mentioned a little bit about the practical living aspect of Anabaptist faith. Is there
Mhm.
anything more you want to add to that, or shall we talk about the challenges that
Mm.
we're looking ahead at as far as what is going to face our faith in the future? I don't know. Your
Yeah.
choice here.
Yeah, a couple of things before we go on to that. I would just want to put a plug in on a recommendation here. It's a classic. It's called The Anabaptist Vision by Harold S. Bender. It's from 19. I have it pulled up here. 1947. I'm gonna say. Just
Hmm.
really outlining. Sorry, 1944. Really outlining the core of what it means to be an Anabaptist, and to think of it not as much. This is in my words, but not really as a denomination, but as a worldview, like a way of reading Scripture, a way of life.
Okay.
And he makes
Uh-huh.
three basic points in there. There's a very short book; it's like 40 pages. Highly recommend. It's really cheap on Amazon. Go buy it, read it. It's great. So the
Okay.
first point is the call to discipleship. So again, not that I raise my hand, I get zapped, boom, now I'm a Christian. It's like there's real
Yeah.
active
Yeah.
discipleship. Second point, the call to community, as in we're doing this together, in church groups.
Uh-huh.
We care for each
Okay.
other, we support each other, we encourage each other. And then point number three, the call to nonviolent love, or I like the term like radical enemy love or radical love for all people. That again is like
Okay.
at like the core. Now, there are some people who kind of argued with his 3 points, like, well, there should have been another point, or maybe you could have used. Either way, it's a really good overview of this is how
He's
we
reducing it
view.
down to the simplest, yeah, simplest
Yeah,
form.
exactly. And
Okay.
another one that I want to quick note to again before we move on.
Okay.
This is just another way of saying it, but we interviewed John Roth, which is a scholar up at Goshen College, and he over on our podcast Anabaptist Perspectives. You can look it up; it's really good. And he wrote a book called Cloud of Witnesses, and he's written a bunch of books, but this is where I got this. And he mentioned this in the interview. 3 points, and he frames them a little bit differently. Jesus is the center of our faith. Point number two, community is the center of our lives. Point number three,
Hmm.
reconciliation is the center of our work. Uh, so those are kind of
Hmm.
similar to what Bender is saying. They're framing them a little differently. And I think
Hmm.
again, you could argue with this. There's people that say, oh, but there's missing a few points. Granted, but that really gets to the core of what we're
Okay.
trying to do as a
Yeah.
group,
Thank you
as
for sharing
Anabaptist
that.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. So I know this has been a topic of discussion among you Anabaptist perspective collaborators, talking about the challenges that you expect the Anabaptist worldview to be facing in the future with new technology and just new challenges that are entering the world. Well, so could you maybe give us some highlights about your concerns and maybe after sharing those, maybe talk to us about maybe some remedies that could answer those concerns?
Man, that's a tough one. That one's pretty broad. There are
Okay.
there are so many challenges right now in the world. You don't. Again, we kind of goes back to this whole. There's nobody out there doubting that humanity needs redemption. I mean, it's.
Yeah, right,
And if they
right.
are, they're just. I don't know. Their minds are closed or something. But we got a lot of war. We got massive technological progress happening with AI and a bunch of other things. The invention of the internet, the ability to access anything, um, good or evil, through the internet.
Hmm. Yes,
Um,
yes,
Obviously we had a global pandemic, and that really changed how people interact. It changed work, it changed relationships, it
yes.
changed how religious institutions function, it changed education. um,
Yeah.
these are some pretty significant upheavals, actually extremely significant, probably once in a generation, to think all those things that I just named coming together. I mean, we're seeing the largest war in Europe since World War II right now, like
Hmm.
in Ukraine Russia situation, and
Yes.
one of the largest wars in the Middle East is happening right now with Israel Hamas. These are pretty significant things. What does that mean for our faith and or our belief system as Anabaptists? And I wish I knew the future. I don't really know. I don't have the answer to that question. The only thing I can say is, I'm very confident in our people and really, the church as a whole to answer these challenges, to serve, to love, to be there, to help. I mean, I can't even off the top of my head even think how many different Anabaptists I know that have went to Ukraine in the last year and a half, helping, doing
Really?
aid work, doing medical work, helping rebuild
Oh
houses
my.
that had been destroyed. I was literally just last weekend talking to two of them, and they were telling stories of, yeah, we were right in there, helping people evacuate, getting food, medical supplies in for civilians, and as explosions are happening, as they're getting hit by shock waves, and these
Wow.
are people going in
Wow.
totally unarmed. They're not going in with the military. They're completely at extreme personal risk at, doing this voluntarily. And that is exceptional. And that is something I believe is one of the great shining stars of the Anabaptist people. We have pretty consistently done that through the last, ever since we started 500 years ago. Now, there have been times we could have done better. We could have done a lot more. Obviously, like we're humans too. So I don't want to lift us up as superheroes, but it is this sense of the world is a pretty dark place, but I also see these incredible bright spots of, again, these friends of mine going into somewhere like Ukraine and being a little
Yes.
a little point of light, a little slice of Jesus's kingdom coming into a very dark, very bleak situation, and that gives me a lot of hope. Um, who
Sure.
knows
It
what the
should.
future will hold? I
It
have a feeling
should.
there'll be a lot more opportunities for things like that, in the future. But again,
So,
I'm yeah,
so,
it gives me courage.
mhm. So are you saying that believers, followers of Jesus, need to be engaged in the needs that are arising, to be willing to go serve, and that's going to make the difference in not being sucked into the vortex of these challenges that are, you know,
Mm.
that we are facing.
I think that, yeah, I think you used an important word there, engaged with these challenges. Um, I know a lot of what I call armchair warriors or armchair prophets or whatever. They sit in their little armchairs and they say, "Oh, if they would just do this," or "Oh, this is what's wrong." And man, the Israel Hamas one particularly, because I do a lot of work in the Middle
Mm-hmm.
East. I've just heard so many opinions and this and that and whatever. And I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
like, this isn't
yeah.
this. So what? Like, it's not helping the people who need help right now. Like, clearly, this is a very
Right.
nasty situation. This is a really, really sad
Yes.
thing that is happening right now.
Yes.
I don't really care like which side you are vying for. It just like, why are we sitting here talking about this when we could go on a plane and maybe help some people, or at least be praying about it instead of just venting whatever. And so I think the key
Mm-hmm.
word you used there was engage with these things. And I've been very impressed with the Anabaptist people with their willingness to engage with these things. Again, we're not always that good at it, and we make mistakes, but we do tend to have a pretty hands-on style of doing things. So when something like that
Yes.
goes down, they tend to be like when Ukraine happened. Like, I was getting messages pretty much right away of like, okay, how quick are we getting on a plane? Let's go. And I was just like, wow, you're talking the largest ground war in Europe since World War II, and this is 2 days after, and they're already like, let's go.
Wow.
That really
Wow.
says something, and I really appreciate that.
Yes. So it just struck me too that you have people in your communities that are willing to go serve on a moment's notice in situations that arise. But you also have some very interesting characters that are coming from a different angle, like that brother that is studying at Oxford University, learning Greek and Hebrew. Maybe you can talk about
Yeah.
the the development of new new ways of thinking or deeper ways of thinking of studying that
Mm.
can help enable your communities to be more on the cutting edge with
Mm.
knowledge
Mm.
of very important things like biblical knowledge, historical biblical context, and so forth. Is there something you could talk to in that
Yeah.
regard?
Yeah, that's something I really believe in. My particular slice of Anabaptist, because there's a big continuum. Um, but what I would say is, like, broadly represented on the Anabaptist Perspectives podcast. tends to come from a very agricultural and hands-on lifestyle. That
Hmm.
has probably to do with some of the Amish and the older groups. Most people are doing, manual labor jobs, building things, inventing things,
Uh-huh.
farming, which are wonderful. That is fantastic. I think that's fabulous. I mean, you keep doing it because that means when something like Ukraine goes down, hey, we know how to build houses. Like, let's go over there and fix some houses that got blown up. That kind of thing. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes.
One area though that I do feel we could do better at is the challenge of academia, and I frame it as a challenge just because it's something our people just haven't done that much of, at least recently. Now, in the past, that would have been different. We did some
Hmm.
episodes on that about some of the early Anabaptist founders and how they were very
Oh,
educated, very articulate. We're not afraid of higher education or whatever you want to call it. But I would say now, at least currently, and it is changing, but especially like my parents' generation, or there would have been this kind of suspicion of education because they saw a lot of, again, we've done some episodes on this, but some with Chester Weaver especially, but where these Mennonite colleges went extremely liberal and lost a lot of their key values, things that are very central to what we believe, and that kind of resulted in this. And I'm using some real broad strokes here, but that resulted in a lot of
uh-huh.
suspicion of higher education, um, and some of that is justified, but some of that I think is a bit too far. So yes, you mentioned a friend of mine, Vince Byler is his name, and he's studying. It's actually at Cambridge. He's doing his PhD
Cambridge.
in
Okay.
it's studying Hebrew, or like Old Testament manuscripts and rabbinical manuscripts and things.
Ah.
Um, I don't actually know the exact name of the degree, but yeah, Cambridge is one of the. I mean, they're one of the top tier institutions for Old Testament manuscripts and things. Their archive is incredible. So yeah, that's a very very unusual thing for
Yeah.
Anabaptists. I
Yeah.
don't know of any Anabaptist ever in history to go to Cambridge and get a PhD. He may very well be the first, which he may hesitate me even saying this, but we've interviewed him about it. It's up on the channel, so I feel comfortable saying it.
Okay.
But he's a very humble fellow, and if you're seeing this, Vince, you have a very valuable thing to contribute because our people don't do that thing very often, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so I would like to see more of that, but it's really challenging. It's really challenging, and
Well,
yeah,
maybe that's
I'm not sure what all the
maybe.
solution is there, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
it could be. It could be that properly educated spiritual men can help meet some of the challenges that are coming in this
Mm,
direction with,
that's a really good, yeah,
yeah,
it's a really good
a
point.
good understanding and a good way. I think that in this world today, we have to be willing and able to engage in meaningful discussions and to
Mm.
be able to persuade people that we know what we're talking about with respect to the truth of God. So,
I
yeah,
yeah
I really applaud
yeah
those efforts.
yeah
Hmm.
I yeah, there's someone I work with closely, who has a PhD in philosophy as a conservative
Hmm.
Anabaptist, and that is extremely unusual. Again, I don't know of anybody else in the conservative Anabaptist world that does. There's probably a few out there, but it's extremely rare. Um, but I think that's super valuable. That person brings something to the table that nobody else does. And that's significant. That's a big deal. Now, does
Yes,
that mean we should all leave
yes.
our farms and our jobs building houses and go to college and get PhDs? No, I think one of the most valuable things is we are a very hands-on people, and that has a huge upside. But could a few
Mhm.
more maybe go for some more education, or be involved in
Yes.
some of these things, or whatever? I think that could be good. I think that could be
Uh-huh.
a positive thing. So.
Okay, beautiful. So, are there any other things with respect to works that are being done in the broader world that you would like to touch upon? You did mention something about defusing landmines in Kosovo, and I don't know if there's anything. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, that's oh man,
I thought that
yeah,
was
I'd
pretty
forgotten it.
interesting.
Yeah, we'd been emailing some, and I'd mentioned that. I forgot about that. That's a good point. So yeah, if you go to my personal YouTube channel, there's a video there, something like, I forget what it's called. I went to Kosovo to learn about explosives or something like that. So one of the nonprofits I'm involved with, an Anabaptist group, you know, we started looking really at war zones. I've been in some places that would be categorized as war zones or recent war zones, and the amount of unexploded munitions and bombs in those areas is mind-boggling, horribly
Hmm.
sad, because you have civilians that are trying to return home, rebuild their homes. They just want to get on with their life. They don't really care about the war. It's like, just please just leave us alone. But they can't, because, oh, there is a bomb inside their house that fell and didn't explode. And this is actually extremely common.
Wow.
Unfortunately,
Huh.
so most people, when they think of this, like EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, or there's other terms for it, but that's the main one. They think, oh, well, that's the military's job. Well, the really
Huh.
sad reality is the military does not do that. They
Wow.
drop a bunch of bombs, but they don't like, it's not really our problem to clean that up afterwards. The only time they'll do it is if it endangers their own troops. Then they'll clear out
Huh.
explosives. But they're not going to go
Wow.
into a civilian sector and clear it out. And this is basically universal of any military in the world, including the United States, unfortunately. The
Hmm.
United States is a little better at it than some countries, but the problem is each year with all these new wars, the amount of ordnance being added, explosives being added to the world is insane. You have to, I forget the exact stats, but it's mind boggling.
Huh.
And there's very few people working to remove these things. Now, it is possible. There's some pretty advanced training you can get. And we got to thinking about that and just saying, wait a second, as Anabaptists, we really believe violence is not the answer. We do not believe war is the
Wow.
solution here. Jesus is the solution.
Yes.
The
Right.
redemption of Jesus' kingdom is the
Mm.
answer. What better way to show
Yes.
that than to come in unapologetic about that as humanitarian workers,
Huh.
as Jesus following, Christ loving, radical love, loving our enemies, coming in and removing these instruments of death. These are horrific weapons
Wow.
designed to maim and kill. And it just went click in my head one day. I was just like, oh my, like, why aren't our people doing this? We need to figure this out. Well, it turns out it's extremely complicated to figure out. This is not easy.
It
Um,
sounds dangerous. It
it is,
sounds
yes,
dangerous.
it is definitely dangerous, but that would be part of it. Are we willing to lay down our lives? Are we willing to say we believe this stuff? Oh, we don't go to war. We don't go to war. Well, but then what are we doing to actually bring a solution? So we did a lot of
Huh.
research, and there is a group in Kosovo that trains civilians, non-military, so like aid workers, that kind of thing, to do
Okay.
to remove explosives. And the really cool part, their policy is you destroy all the explosives. You make sure and destroy them right there on site, burn them up, blow them up, whatever you have to do, get rid of them so they can never be used
Oh.
again and never harm another human again. Um,
Huh.
which is a really cool thing because they're not a Christian group. They're I think they're about the only one in the world that would train us to the right standards. So we sent a team through that. They got their
Wow.
training. Um, they're certified. And as far as I know, they're the only Anabaptists in the world, ever in the history of the world, to have that kind of certification, because this is a new thing. I don't know of anybody that's done this. If somebody knows
So
more about that or other groups that have done this, please contact me because this is
were,
kind of
were
new.
you
So
on the site where this training was taking place?
yeah, I was there for a couple of days.
Okay, because I think you made a video of your
Hmm.
visit to that place.
I did. Yeah. So that's up
You-
on my YouTube channel. I know you could put a link. Forget the title. I wrote about it some in my newsletter. It was a pretty
Okay.
formative experience for me, because they had all these training munitions the explosives have been removed, but these are real weapons that were used that they recovered there from the Bosnian Serbian wars or the war in the Balkans.
Yeah.
And just to think about the horrors that humans have put all this effort into inventing super creative ways to kill each other. It's
Right.
just so sad to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Um,
is. Yeah. I thought.
yeah.
I thought about like the first time a bomb was dropped out of an airplane. What that must have felt and looked like. Can you imagine being the first one to drop a bomb? I mean,
Man,
and then I don't know, it's just like it had to be a really psychological hurdle to overcome. That's
Mm,
first of all, someone's flying an airplane, which didn't happen, and then they got this explosive that they're going to drop, and quite
mm,
likely, drop it on civilians in London or so. So,
yeah.
like precedent-setting stuff, and then it's done
Yeah.
now without even a second thought.
I mean, the
Yeah,
amount of munitions has grown exponentially, used in war, and I wish I had stats on it, but it's like all the munitions used in World War One, were consumed in just a short amount of time, and this only tiny little battle in World War Two, or what, like it grew exponentially
Yeah.
in this just 20-year span, and then it grew even more in the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War, and then
Yes.
the
Yes.
the war in Iraq, which was just, I mean, unbelievable amounts of explosives are still there from that war.
Wow.
Um, the U.S. withdraws all these bombs, say, and if you have, say, a failure rate of, say, 5% won't explode, which isn't that terribly unusual. So 5%, you're dropping thousands and thousands of these bombs. I mean, you can do the math really quick. The thing is, these things are still very dangerous. So one of the last casualties from World War One munition, World War One, so this is over 100 years ago, was, I'm going to say it was like 3 years ago. If you look up
Oh,
the records of civilian
yeah.
casualties for World War One, there's
Yeah.
one from, like, I think it's like 2019 or 2020. A farmer out in his field, plowing his field, hit an old explosive that was still there from World War One. It's buried in the dirt where it
Yeah.
landed, unexploded, hit it with a plow, I think, exploded, and it killed him. And he's
Wow.
listed as a civilian casualty of World War One. The point being, these explosives will sit in the ground like forever until someone does something about it. And again, so those are bad things. Those are horrific things. But I look at that and say, what clearer testimony could we give of, we believe in nonviolence, we don't believe in war, and we won't just say that. We won't sit in our little armchairs comfortably here in America and just say that. We'll actually go to these places and actually live it. That will speak way more than, some of my friends. They'll get on Facebook and have their Facebook rants about how war is terrible and how, this is so dumb with
Yeah.
Israel, Hamas, whatever it might be. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's so cheap. Talk is so cheap. But actually getting over there and helping clean up that mess and helping to make it safe for civilians again, and
Just out of
helping bring
curiosity.
restoration to their lives,
Yeah.
like that's Jesus stuff right there. I don't know if it gets much better than that, honestly. In my opinion, of course, I'm maybe a little
Did
biased,
you
but
actually learn? Did you actually learn how to defuse a bomb while you were there? That's
no, that's a very
yeah.
advanced skill. That was about 6 weeks of hands-on training. It's
Oh,
very expensive, very time-consuming process. Once you get this,
wow.
this is the challenge we're facing now. Actually, this is where we can use some help. Is we have all the skills and the credentials to do it, but you need sign off from like certain organizations to be able to operate, actually use the skill on the
Oh,
field, and we've really struggled with that one.
huh.
There's kind of like these closed doors where they actually don't want you to operate in some of these places because it makes this person look bad, or these people want to do it so they can make lots of money at it, or it's just a mess. So we're trying
Oh,
to figure that out right now. It's really,
so
really sad. We had some guys in Ukraine trying, and it was basically like, oh no, we can make more money if we don't let you here, so we can get the contract from the government and make millions of dollars, so leave.
oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's really sad. It's super corrupt,
Yeah.
and we want to help. We want to change that. Um,
So
who
so
knows
they
how it will
make
go? But
there's
yeah,
money being made
I,
when the bombs are manufactured, and money being made when they're disarmed as well.
it's so messed
All
up, man.
business.
It is. It is. War is really good money for some people.
Yeah, yeah. They create the
I hate
disease
to say
and
it, but
they charge for the cure too.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
Well, this has been a very nice discussion so far. So what what other, like, is there anything else in this realm of activities that are happening worldwide, missions and so forth, that you want to touch upon? How about in the mission field?
yeah, like I want to be careful that this isn't us, you know, pointing a spotlight on ourselves and saying, "Look how great we are," and all of that, because that's
No.
not what this is about. And that's the thing with them. Should be careful I don't use names here. But there's some people, there's different ministries that were operating inside Mosul, Iraq, when ISIS was there, and they were pushing them out, and it was the worst urban combat of this century so far. Really brutal stuff. And there was a
Hmm.
number of Christian ministries in there, and of course they're making YouTube videos, they're showing all this stuff they're doing, and that's all good. I bless them. I've worked with some of them. We know some of those people personally that are in these videos. um, but what you don't hear about is there were also Anabaptists there as well, who were committed to nonviolence and not, yeah, radical love for the enemy, doing some equally impressive and amazing and actually stunning things and saving lives and medical care. And, you don't hear about them. And
Hmm.
initially that really bothered me because I was like, well, but we should be telling that story. That's such a big deal because all these other ministries that are not non-resistant at all and were quite
Oh,
violent
huh,
when it suited them,
wow,
and got involved in the war there in Iraq.
huh.
And again, yeah, I want to be careful. I don't throw anybody on the bus because they did good work. They did do things that were profitable. Um, those people seem to get all the spotlight. They're in the news, whatever. The Anabaptists who are over there doing radical enemy love at
Hmm.
extreme personal risk, and these are people I know personally, um, don't get the spotlight at all, and they don't want it. And that was the part that really stuck out to me, and that felt suddenly that kind of went click in my head of this is a real Jesus follower when they are willing to do something like that, and they don't get limelight, and nobody really knows, and they humbly serve and they do their bit and they save lives and they make a real difference, and you never know about
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
You never hear their names. They're not in the news, and they will live their quiet lives, and the world will go on, but there will be people that are alive right now whose lives are forever changed, or that they are alive to begin with because those people showed up and they did what Jesus called them to do. And that's really stuck with me, and it's been a true honor and privilege to know those people. And so there's a part of me that almost feels weird coming on a podcast like this where I sit in my little comfortable spot here in America, and I've done very little compared to those people that I know, and will never do anything as remarkable as some of these other people that are out there doing this every day. But maybe I can still turn a spotlight on that as not lifting up the individual. I'm not naming names. I'm not saying what they did. I haven't done those things, but I can point to that and say, that's real Christianity. That is
Hmm.
Jesus followers saying, I believe this and I will live it out, not just right here in my hometown, but I'm going to go to the worst parts in the world and live it there too, even at great personal risk. Um,
So I
and
happen
that,
to
that makes
know,
me very excited.
yeah, I happen to know people who've done similar things.
Yeah.
I have a friend who was in Syria for 3 months, I think close to 3 months, as a nurse helping
Mm,
wounded fighters who were actually Israel was the one that recommended they go inside of Syria because they needed uh, they needed help during the civil war that was going on there, and the the witness they had was pretty dramatic.
mm,
The folks in Syria there who normally were the enemies of Christianity
mm,
were very impressed by their love and their service. So
mm.
perhaps not being in the spotlight can have a big advantage. maybe
Yes.
maybe maybe the effect of doing it in this manner is going to change hearts and lives in ways that big publicity stunts would not. So that
Oh,
has to be our hope
oh,
too. Yes.
I so agree with that. Yeah, it's
Yes.
so true.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's so true. And
Do,
so I
do you
guess
have
that's
any?
the
Mhm.
piece I would really want to leave with people is just that humble service every day,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and wherever that might take you. That may take you to the other side of the world, you know, saving lives. It may mean you sign up for your local fire company and represent Jesus there, and save people's houses or join the ambulance service.
Hmm.
Or it may mean you run a godly business and take good care of your employees and are an honest business person, which is a huge testimony. All those
Sure.
things are wonderful ways to represent Jesus in your own quiet
Hmm.
way without saying, look at me, look at how great we are. Let Jesus speak for himself, you know?
Yes, that's
Um,
right. I like that.
so
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
that's why I want to be careful when I come on these podcasts that I don't, make it sound like, oh, I've got it figured
No,
out
no.
and I have
Believe
all these
me, you.
experiences, and I do. I have some experiences, but nothing compared to so many other people, and that's okay. And I want to put the spotlight on them, you know,
I
um,
appreciate that. Yeah, that
so
humility. I really appreciate. Do you do you expect that when things settle down a little bit in the Gaza Strip, that there might be some opportunity to go and help in some capacity.
So this is interesting to bring that up. Um, I care really deeply about the whole Israel Palestine situation. I've been to Jordan a bunch of times, and that's full of refugees from when Israel
Mm-hmm.
became a nation, and they had to leave. I've been up to the Golan Heights before, walked through a minefield without realizing it up there,
Oh, really?
I've been to Israel itself. I haven't spent time in the West Bank, um, but there's an Anabaptist group that I knew or that I know that's been working or had been working in the Gaza Strip for years, very
Really?
quietly, yeah,
Huh.
inside the Gaza Strip. And I was talking to one of them, and I asked him, like, how does that work? Like, Gaza Strip is controlled by Hamas. This is a decent number of years ago, and he said, well, we made connections with Hamas and they signed off on it. Like, they gave them the permission. They have
Really?
to. You have to have a permission slip or what. I don't know how all it worked, but they had to have a
Ah,
permission slip from Hamas to let them
wow.
operate, to bring in medical supplies and food and things like that. So, yeah, they were making multiple trips in there each week, bringing in
Wow.
supplies and helping people. And, oh, wow. Like, isn't God's kingdom amazing? When you have a
Yes.
conservative, non-violent, radical love group like the Anabaptists working with Hamas, of all people, a really pretty terrible group, a terrorist organization, um, and making that all work out to where they can get in there and help people is really beautiful. And my point being, there's always a way. There's always a way to love and support and to care about people. And we may have to get very
So,
creative. This current war is making it
do,
very, very
do,
complicated. But
yeah, yes.
I can't wait to see what our people are going to do. I'm convinced the Anabaptists are going to figure something out. It seems like they kind of
Do,
do.
do you
So,
happen to know? Do you happen to
say
know
again?
how they got into the Gaza Strip? Did
How?
they enter through Israel or did they enter through the Egyptian border? Any idea?
Through Israel, to my knowledge.
Through
Yeah.
Israel. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was cooperation on both sides. The
Yes.
Israelis allowed them to enter, and Hamas. Yeah. Well, my
Allowed
friend that was
them
in
to be in there.
Syria was. Yeah.
Okay.
My friend that was in Syria was talking about some kind of possible collaboration where they would set a hospital up right right on the border there and treat
Wow.
Palestinians. Yeah, and the Israelis were in favor of that too. So it's very unfortunate. I
Man.
think Israel really was looking forward to having a more mild form of Hamas, and to kind of like settle things down a little bit and come up with some kind of normalcy. And the
Mm.
attack on October 7th really changed that dramatically. Unfortunately,
It did.
yes,
Yeah, it really changed the
yeah.
game for that, but also the broader Middle East too. It could get interesting. I don't know if the violence is going to spread that much, but the mindsets and the deepening entrenching that this will have on certain ideologies around the Middle East, not just Hamas and Israel, is going to
Sure.
be significant. And this is a plug for you know uh, peace loving Christians around the world. This is an opportunity to get involved, and
Yes, I
not
agree.
on either side. We don't care.
Hmm.
I mean, at least I don't really care on either side. It's about bringing redemption and bringing Jesus into a situation that is a really, really tense and difficult time. And I look at that as what an opportunity for the church. So I really hope some
Amen.
people to do
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I've had several interviews with a Jewish friend of mine who's become a Christian, a
Hmm.
Jew, and it's very refreshing to see what that looks like when
Hmm.
a Jewish man will turn and find redemption in Messiah and just the change that happens. So
Wow. Yeah.
Jesus is the Jewish Messiah after all, right?
Hmm.
So
Wow.
that's that's a task for us to actually demonstrate the Jesus of the first century, to be representing the true Jesus, the
Hmm.
biblical
Yeah.
one. So yeah. So I guess this interview has gone probably for long enough, or we should probably wrap things up. I appreciate you coming on this late in the day, kind of a
Sure.
spontaneous way. I wonder if you could just close by sharing your own personal hope for eternal life. What do you wait for?
Man. Yeah, wow, that's something. You know, the more I look into this and study these things, the more it becomes a mystery. I use that word carefully, but I think it's the right word because how can I, as a in my current state, fully understand what is coming? And that, for me at least, is so exciting because oh wow, what's this redemption going to look like? Jesus has started
Hmm.
that process in my life, but we know from the writings of Paul and other things, it's not complete yet. We see, through the
Yes.
glass dimly, but soon we'll know, or we'll see face to face. And what will that be like? I don't really know, but it's very exciting to see. The process has started. The sanctification has. I hope I have a long ways to go, but sanctification process has started, and the mystery and the beauty that is around what will be in the future is um, really inspiring to me. It really is because, yeah, of course we can't fully understand all these things. We don't know,
Well, okay.
all
So maybe
all that
just
Jesus is doing,
maybe
but
just
like,
in
yeah,
yeah, one term that comes up often, and
mm-hmm.
it's found in First Corinthians 15th chapter as well, is the term resurrection.
Whew,
What does the
yeah,
term resurrection mean to you?
wow,
Do you live in hope of resurrection?
yeah, because you see that where so there's this theme of redemption and restoration and things, but when you look at resurrection, what does resurrection mean? It's like this thing was dead and now it's not dead anymore, which is a mind blowing, like just absolutely mind blowing. And that's the one thing actually that Christianity has that's so different from other religions. It says, wait, there's a resurrection, like this thing that is dead, or like I'm going to die someday, but like I'm not actually because of the resurrection. And that just is wow. Our human brains have a hard time even comprehending how big a deal that is, and how that changes
Mm-hmm.
the game. I guess you could say,
Yes.
um, on there's a real fear of death for many people, and I don't think anybody's fully immune from that. Um,
No.
but there's another chapter in the story, so it's almost like this life, but then there's, because of the resurrection, there's so much more there. And I really see that when when
Yes.
you lose people that are close to you through death. This isn't a
Mm-hmm.
final thing. Like there is a resurrection beyond this, and that is, wow, that's a big deal.
Okay. So
Um,
that actually, the concept of resurrection, we were talking earlier in this conversation about what the Jews think, what the Hebrews think. 613 laws. We should be concerned about this, but what about the Greeks? Do they got it right? But it seems like there are certain themes that are present in the Old Testament that become very pronounced in the New
mm,
Testament. Resurrection is one of those themes.
hmm.
And the fact that this human Jesus died and was raised again with an incorruptible body really speaks something to us about what resurrection looks like, doesn't it? He being the first fruits
Hmm.
from the dead, the firstborn, and so forth, seated at God's right hand at this present time in the heavens, but returning to initiate a general resurrection to that we will rise again. I mean, I know what you're saying. Like, this is
Oh
hard to
yeah.
comprehend,
Oh
but it
yeah.
is a lively hope, is it not?
Oh yeah. Oh, it so is. Like, it's, makes you kind of curious, like, wow, how's that going to work? What's that going to look like? I guess we're going to find out someday, because wow, that is something.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, it's
yes,
pretty
yes. All the
wild
more
because
reason. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you look at other religions and they don't really have something like that. My brother
No.
was over in Thailand working with Buddhist monks, um, for a while, and and one of them made a comment. It's like, Buddha never died for us, and he's dead. Like right now, he's dead, and it's like Jesus not
Hmm.
only died for us, he's actually alive. He's actually alive right now, which is just it. Kind of
Yes.
the guy just was like, wow, like our religion doesn't have
Yeah.
that. Buddha's been dead for
Hmm.
thousands of years, and I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. You could say the same about Islam. Muhammad is dead, and that's that. There's no
Right.
resurrection there, and you
So
could do
this
that. I don't.
gentleman in Thailand actually recognized this. That's quite a testimony, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And this fellow was a
Huh.
Buddhist. I mean, he did not become a Christian. Was like, no,
Ah,
I don't believe this. But he acknowledged like, wow, that is beautiful and very special, and our
ah,
religion does not have that. He said that,
hmm.
and that really, wow, it took my brother aback. He didn't expect him to be that open. Um,
Uh-huh.
so yeah,
So there's a definite power there, isn't there?
oh
It's
yeah, there
it's
really is.
it's uh
Yeah.
it's really quite a different thing than turn and burn, right? It's really
Yeah,
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 and I mean,
because
oh man, yeah, because it's just
or
like
turn or burn, I guess yeah,
yeah,
turn or burn.
it's like, oh, death,
Yeah,
where's your sting? As Paul says, it's like,
right,
oh, that's a good
right.
point. Like, um, where's the sting
So
of death?
this
It's gone.
Yeah, yeah. So this I think reflects the good character of God towards humanity, doesn't it? God
Hmm.
doesn't want us to die forever. He wants to restore. He wants to bring life.
Hmm.
And he set for us the pattern in his son, Jesus, that this is actually a reality, it's possible for us to attain unto resurrection. As Jesus did, so can we.
Hmm.
If we follow him as our Lord and Master, as our King. And yeah, this is really, I think, a good way to conclude this wonderful conversation. And it really adds motivation to get
Hmm.
out and to do the work of God, to follow in the path of Jesus. So
Hmm.
this has been a
Yeah.
wonderful conversation, Reagan. I really appreciate you coming on and
Yeah.
sharing these very valuable thoughts. And
Yeah. Well, thanks for
looking,
having me, Tom. This has been good,
okay,
and hopefully, what I shared was at least somewhat interesting for people,
it
or
was.
helpful. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just next time around, don't apologize so much.
I'm just one
Okay.
guy with with a lot of
Yeah.
questions on how this all works, and I'm learning and growing, and
Sure.
fortunately I have a podcast that allows me to ask a lot of these questions to people that are more
Hmm.
seasoned than myself. So that's been wonderful that I've been able to learn from a lot of that. So hopefully I can reflect
Oh,
that back here.
absolutely.
So
It does. It does reflect. Yep.
wow.
Okay. Well, I will wish you God's blessing, a good night, and love and greetings to your dear wife. Thank her
Yes.
for allowing you to separate some time out of your busy day. So,
Yeah. No, it worked. It worked. So yeah, I
okay.
appreciate it, Tom.
Okay. Okay. God bless you. Take care,
All
my
right.
friend,
You as well.
brother. Okay. Bye.